we're building a mental space, a spiritual space around our consciousness. This is ultimately what Chassidut is really all about. You don't really inhabit a certain geographical place. You're inhabiting a cognitive spiritual space. This video was made possible through the kind support of my sponsors over at Patreon. Patreon is a great way to help independent creators like myself produce original content. If you'd like to get more English language videos from me, please consider becoming a supporter via Patreon. You can find the link in the description below. Thank you very much. Shavua Tov, everyone. In a few days from now, on Friday, everyone in the world who's connected in some way to Chassidut, to the inner dimension of the Torah, we're all going to be celebrating Kislev, the 19th day of the month of Kislev, which has been dubbed the New Year of Chassidut, Rosh Hashanah leChassidut. So just a brief background for those of you who don't know. So Chassidut is the greatest, of course, revolution of spiritual renewal in Judaism, and it's about 300 years old. And during the third generation of Chassidut, the founder of Chassidut is, of course, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. His student is Rabbi Dovber of Mezrich, the Maggid of Mezrich. And he had many students, but a leading student of his that in a way inherited the mantle of leading the Hasidic population, especially in Russia, was called Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, and he is known by his disciples as the Alter Rebbe, the Old Rebbe. He is the founder of the Chabad movement within Chassidut. So it started with his story. He was persecuted. There was a lot of opposition to Chassidut, just like every other revolutionary movement. At first it has opposition. And then there was a tale told. It wasn't true. There was a tip that was given to the establishment, the Tsars, the Russian Tsars establishment, and the rumor that was propagated unfortunately by other Jews, was that the money that the Alter Rebbe was transferring to Eretz Israel, to the land of Israel via Turkey, it was really given to the Turkish government as a kind of opposition to the government. He's a traitor and he should be arrested and executed. And so he was indeed arrested, and this was a very bad time for the Hasidic movement because it was on the verge of being shut down, basically. But after 53 days in prison, he was set free on the 19th day of Kislev. And it was also, by the way, the yortzeit of his own Rav, of the Maggid of Mezrich. He was 26 years previously, on the exact same day he passed away, the passing day of a righteous man, a righteous Jew. That's an auspicious date. And so he realized it was no coincidence. It was his blessing was operating sort of behind the curtain. And that was kind of a sign that the disciples of Chassidut are able to now propagate and disseminate the wisdom of Chassidut freely and without any opposition, because the opposition basically collapsed. So it started out as a kind of Chabad holiday, but it was a very major Chabad holiday, all going as far as to call it the holiday of all holidays. And it gradually is becoming, over the years, something that is crossing all denominations within Judaism, because the power of the joy and the activity that Hasidic students are putting into disseminating Chassidut, spreading, it's called Yafutzu Ma'anotecha Chutza, that the wellsprings of Chassidut should burst forth and should spread all over the world. This has become so strong that this holiday has become sort of a major holiday. So 19th day of Kislev, Yutet Kislev, it's a really good opportunity to ask. It's an age-old question, but every time you ask it, you need to look at it from a new angle. Really, what is Chassidut? What is it all about? And what does it come to give us? And we're going to try and do this using a little bit of a different perspective. I also have to surprise myself that every year I need to renew myself in the way I look at this own thing that I'm constantly learning and teaching. So we're going to look at it from this perspective. Chassidut, as we said, it's like a group within Judaism. Not everyone subscribes to Chassidut. It had the opposers, the mitnagdim, and to this day, many people view it critically and so on. But its root is in something that was far more widely accepted, which is the Kabbalah of the Arizal. The Arizal, the Holy Ari, is Rabbi Isaac Luria, the 16th century great Kabbalist, who grew up in Egypt, but spent the last 2 years of his life in Tzfat, in Safed, in the north, and he's buried there. And his Kabbalistic wisdom, it was like a big bang. It was like something immense and unprecedented. It was huge, and it became accepted over a wide breadth of Jewish, branches and denominations. And those who oppose Chassidut also identify with the Ari. So they agree that the Ari was a great Kabbalist, and it's like a watershed moment in the history of Kabbalah. They just don't accept the way Chassidut interprets the Ari. So going back to the Ari is a good starting point to look at what is Chassidut. So something very eye-opening that I learned from Rav Ginsburg a few years ago is that if you look at the disciples of the Ari, the different directions in which the students in the years after the 16th century took his Kabbalah, his wisdom, and learned it and taught it, you can find 3 branches. And the 3 branches beautifully align with concepts, very ancient concepts that come from the book of Yetzirah, the book of formation. This is a very ancient book. We first know of it in the 8th century, but it's far older. And in fact, it's ascribed to no less than Abraham. And edited, the edition we have, we believe, comes from Rabbi Akiva. But it's very, very ancient and very dense and cryptic, but so much of Kabbalah comes from this. And one of the main concepts that we know from Sefer Yetzirah is that the world is made up of 3 types of dimensions. We know today of 3 spatial dimensions, and they're explained there, that there are 3 spatial dimensions. You can go up and down, north and south, east and west, and the 6 directions create the 3 dimensions of space. And then there's something which is really unbelievably revolutionary, because it only came into physics in the 19th century, which is treating time as a dimension also. Time in the Book of Formation is treated, again, very ancient source, is treated as a dimension, and from going from past to future. It's a bit of a different dimension. You can't travel backwards, you can only travel forward, you can't change the speed in which you travel. But so it's not intuitive in many ways that it is a dimension, but today in physics it's very obvious it's dimension, and ever since Einstein, it's one fabric, the space-time continuum, space and time, 4-dimension continuum. So, but this was a novel thing in the 19th century, but for Sefer Yetzirah, it's obvious that time is a 4th dimension that's going from the past to the future. And then comes the even more revolutionary concept, which physics does not yet acknowledge. Maybe it'll happen later on in the 21st century, we'll see. Which is that there is a 5th dimension, and that dimension is soul. Just like there are 3 spatial dimensions that you can go in 6, there are 6. There are 3 spatial dimensions in which you can move in 6 directions. And there's a temporal dimension of time, as you can look back into the past and look forward into the future. There's also a dimension of soul, which is a kind of moral or ethical or spiritual dimension that goes from bad to good. You can morally deteriorate and you can morally elevate. And this is a dimension. So the whole real continuum is not the space-time continuum made up of 4 dimensions, it's a space-time soul continuum made up of 5 dimensions, 3 kinds of dimensions. So this is very sort of interesting in and of itself. But in the sense of what happened with the Ari, it's also eye-opening as to what is Chassidut. And we're going to use these 3 terms, space, time, and soul, or we can abbreviate it to where, when, and who. Where, when, and who. We're going to take all these 3 words, where, when, and who, and we're going to use them in several ways, opening up what Chassidut is all about. So the first implementation of this is to ask those three questions regarding the Ari's Kabbalistic innovations. And so it turns out that three branches grew out of the Ari's teachings. One of them focused on where, the other on when, and the third on who. So the Sephardic Mekubalim that are very much, and we have them to this day, they teach Kabbalah, there's whole yeshivot of Mekubalim, and they focus on the spatial aspect of the Ari's Kabbalah, and I'll explain what I mean. So I didn't mention the names that these kinds of dimensions have in the book of Yetzirah. They're called Olam, Shana, Nefesh. Olam literally means world, and that is the space dimensions. So it has to do with worlds. And then the time dimension is called Shana, which means year, but it also means change. Change takes place over time. Year being a major unit of time, not the only one. But the main thing about the year is that things change over years, or over time in generally. So we have Olam, and then Shana, and then Nefesh. So Nefesh is soul. So that's pretty straightforward. So the Sephardic Mekubalim, right, those who come from North Africa and Morocco and many countries that were under Islamic rule, they have their own style of Kabbalah, and their style of Kabbalah very much focuses on what we can call the architecture of Kabbalah. All the worlds, the channels, and how the specific intentions, the kavanot, that the Mekubalim have when they daven, how it changes the worlds. When the Mekubal, the student of Kabbalah, prays in a certain way, and every word, he means a certain kavanah, and it has to do with permutations of letters. It's very technical. It has to do with the architecture. You have to know the map of the different worlds and how the channels all interact. And so by going into the intricacies of this architecture, or sometimes it's like plumbing, because there's a lot of pipes going in all kinds of directions, you can change what is going on in the higher worlds, and that changes, reverberates back down into this world. And so the Mekubal can sort of be a partner with God in the way the inner mystical worlds move about. You know, he's changing the cogwheels of what's going on behind the curtain. And this is very technical and very spatial. Why? Because again, it's worlds and channels and certain elements moving from one place to another. So this is, relatively speaking, a chitzoni, an external understanding of what the Ari was all about. Because the world's space is the most external dimensions. Then we move to the Ramchal. Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, an Italian Kabbalist, 18th century contemporary of Chassidut, and again a student some generations ahead of the Ari. He put the focus on time and processes. And he said in every certain period of time, every year, every month, every day, every minute, and every epoch in history, God manifests in different ways. And this, he was basically taken up in many ways by the Vilna Gaon, the Hagra, the leader of the Litvish movement that later on was to oppose Chassidut. And they admired the Ramchal very much. And from their Bet Midrash, from their house of study, came the whole direction of using Kabbalah to understand historical processes. And the most famous rabbi in the recent generations who took this and sort of made his whole theology based on this is Rav Kook. Rav Kook very much focuses on what is called in academia historiosophy. Historiosophy is the wisdom of history, the inner work of how history works. So he kept seeing everything that's going on as a sign of how the redemption is advancing, and he saw the whole world as evolving towards redemption. And he would focus on periods of history and say, well, in this period you had this kind of divine, godly light, and another period, another. And then he saw the whole Zionist movement as pushing forward, moving forward the process of redemption, even though the Zionists themselves were not believers so much. And so that was his whole approach, and it very much is rooted in the temporal, historical, process-oriented reading of the Ari. So we had space, olamot, and time, olam, and time, shana, and now we have nefesh, soul. So which branch of Kabbalah is this? This is Chassidut. Chassidut is not so much focused on the architecture and the technical aspect of the Kabbalistic, map of the cosmos, or creation of the many worlds. It uses them, it knows them, the great Hasidic sages all knew them, but it's totally not the focus. In fact, for the Baal Shem Tov, he didn't like it so much when people focus so much on the kavanot, the technical kavanot. He said the technical kavanot are like having a lot of different keys that open a lot of different doors, and you have to find the right key to the right door. But there's a better way to open the doors. You take an axe and you break all the doors. And what is the axe? The axe is the broken heart. The simple kavanah. One simple kavanah, it's like a skeleton key. It opens up all the doors. So it could be a skeleton key, it could be an axe. But it's the main idea is that if you want to be one with God, and your soul craves God, you don't need all those kavanot. It's higher, it's simpler, but it's higher. It goes along with the idea that for it's interesting, the more Sephardic Mekubalim, it's very tough to understand. You have to be a very advanced student. With the temporal interpretation, it's also very high, and for the Litvish people, it's when you're an adult, you can really start learning Kabbalah. But the Rav Kook took it and turned it into something more popular, because it turned it into what justified the whole religious national movement. With Chassidut, we go all the way in the other direction, and it's for everyone. You don't need to be a Kabbalist. You don't need to know so much Kabbalah. You just need to understand that Kabbalah is the inner wisdom of the Torah, and it echoes the inner levels of your own soul. And so through the inner wisdom of the Torah, you connect to the inner levels of your own soul, your own heart. And you can be connected in a very simple way. And that's why he liked simple Jews. So, in many ways, what is Chassidut? Chassidut is the spiritual, psychological implementation and interpretation of Kabbalah. It takes Kabbalah into a spiritual, psychological direction. It's not focused so much on the worlds, the architecture, the cosmology. It's not focused on the historiosophy or the historical processes, because with Chassidut, the main thing is that Mashiach can come now, at any moment, just like the famous Midrash says that Yochanan ben Zakkai, he found the Mashiach and he asked him, when are you coming? He said, today. And today means every day can come. And if you live in the moment, and you're present in the moment, Mashiach is there in many ways. This is the Hasidic reading. It's the most abstract, because we're above space and we're above time. So we're shedding in many ways the dimension of space, the dimension of time, and we're focusing on the spiritual, psychological. That's why it's for everyone. And that's why it's the most internal and inner and subtle reading of what Kabbalah is all about. So that's a very good definition of what is Chassidut. So again, the Olam, world's reading, that would be the most external. When you focus on the time and the processes, it's a bit more internal, because you have to go into what is changing and how it's changing. It's not just how the channels operate. But then when you get to your own, again, spiritual, psychological presence of being, connecting to God through the Torah, through the mitzvot, through everyday existence, it's the most internal way. And so the reading of Kabbalistic ideas that Chassidut is all about, it's the most subtle and the most profound in many ways, the most inward oriented. So that's, again, a very good definition of what Chassidut is all about. Now, in fact, this idea that this is the most inner reading is taken another step. Kabbalah is called the soul of the Torah, Nishmeta Deoraita. That the Torah, as we all know it, it has the commandments, it has the Jewish law, it has the stories, the simple reading of the stories, some more profound levels. But the deeper you go, and as you get to the esoteric level, the level of Sod, secret, this is called Nishmeta Deoraita, the soul of the Torah. Chassidut calls itself the soul of the Torah. Meaning that if you learn Kabbalah in other ways, That's fine, you're learning the soul of the Torah, but relatively speaking, even that can become materialized in a way. If you're just going into the architecture and the historical processes, in a way you're running away from the deepest understanding of what it is you're learning. All the secrets of, you learn the Sefirot, you learn about the Olamot, you learn about the interpretations the Zohar gives, all those concepts. If you really want to understand it, you have to understand it as taking place within your soul. If you're saying, oh, this is a historical process, and the Jewish nation and the world is evolving towards Geulah, it's like watching a beautiful movie. It's a bit outside of you. And if you're going into the architecture, it's even more outside of you. So if you want to go into the soul of the Torah, that would be Chassidut. Nishmeta den nishmeta. And it goes with yet another phrase, right? The Kabbalah is called the secrets of the Torah. Razin deoraita. Razin is secrets, one of the words for secrets. And Chassidut is called Razin de Razin. Now there's a beautiful wordplay here. Raz is secret, one of the words for secret, Raz. Raz is also the root of the word thin, Razeh. Razeh is thin. Secrets are subtle. They're thin. They're thinner than thin if you go into the Razin de Razin, the secrets within secrets. So the Hasidic interpretations are subtle. People sometimes ask, I'll give you an example. If you go to a Sephardic Mekubal and you tell him, I have bad things in life, maybe I should change something, very often they will tell you to change your name. If you change your name, then the letters, the gematria, it works in another way, and you're trying to use an external change in order to precipitate an internal change. The Hasidic approach is not to change your name, unless it's something really horrible. It's not to change your name. It's you have to change your own, the way you live, the way you interpret your name, the way you view your life. You don't have to make, and you don't have to have all these external, certain words that you play with them and you change them. And no, it's a subtler reading of things. So when you look into the Kabbalistic concepts, you have to go into what they really mean on the inside, not so much, and also it becomes less terrifying. Sometimes if you're studying only Kabbalah without Chassidut, you become very terrified. That another good example is there's a lot of talk in Kabbalah about demons and angels. Those become in Chassidut psychological aspects. It's the demons of the better angels of our nature and the demons of our nature. And it doesn't mean they're not real, they're very real, but they're real in a subjective way. So the more you refine your understanding of the Kabbalistic concepts, the more you are on a Hasidic track, we can say, of going into a better understanding of what's going on the inside. So the Razin de Razin is going all the way into your own soul, and very beautifully the same word. There's several words for secrets in Hebrew. This word Razim is used, there's a special blessing that you say if and when you happen to see a massive Jewish crowd of over 600,000 people. So if you see 600,000 people, Shishim Ribo, it can take place in some massive demonstration, you need to say a blessing which is called Baruch Ata Hashem, blessed are you Hashem, Elokeinu Melech HaOlam, right? Our God, the Master of the Universe. And then you say Chacham HaRazim, the wise, the sage, or the master of secrets. Why? Why that particular blessing? Because it has to do with individuality. The idea, the blessing is that you see this massive crowd, and they all blend together into some huge wave, but you need to remember that each one is an individual, each one is different. This is why you need to say that blessing. That you don't let them melt into this impersonal crowd, but you remember, there's a famous Israeli poet who wrote, her name was simply Rachel, famous in the kibbutzim world. And she wrote a little poem, said, I don't remember the exact words, but I'm paraphrasing. It's something like, I still cannot get over the fact that every lit window that I look at, behind this window stands another person whose life is not less profound than my own life. It's a little poem, it's a beautiful little poem. And this is Chacham Arazim, right? That you see, you walk in the street, big city, so many windows, and you need to remember behind each window there's a raz, there's a secret. So and it's very thin, right? The crowd is fat, but the souls are thin, and they're on the inside.
What does remez mean? Remez.
Remez is a hint or illusion.
Yes, so it's not.
So there is some connection, right? Because it's raz with another letter in between. So there is, you can definitely feel the phonetical connection, and the letters are there within the word remez. Remez is also subtle, right? Remez is also something very subtle. Okay, so now let's use the same terminology of where, when, and who, and apply it to the birth of Chassidut in the 18th century. We're going to ask, why there, why then, and why by those people? So there's very interesting answers. They all give us glimpses as to what Chassidut is all about. So the where is Eastern Europe. So why Eastern Europe? Could have been Western Europe, could have been North Africa, could have been land of Israel. The great Kabbalists, the Ari lived in Israel, the Ramak before him lived in Israel. Before that, the Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the Zohar was Israel. And this is basically all stages of Kabbalah prior to Chassidut are very much Eretz Israel oriented. So you had Avraham and Rabbi Akiva, the Sefer Yetzirah, that's Eretz Israel, the Zohar is Eretz Israel, and the Ari is Eretz Israel. And all the Mekubalim of Tzfat in the 16th century. But Chassidut is in Eastern Europe. So what's special about Eastern Europe? So I remember this sunk in for me the first time I went to Ukraine to visit the resting places of the great Hasidic masters. And the thing that struck me was that we're all used, when we get off a plane, we need to reset our wristwatches to the right time zone, where the time zone is changed. When you go from Israel to Ukraine, you don't change the time zone. It's pretty much going north. It's not east, not west. You're in the same time zone as Eretz Israel. What is unique about Eretz Israel? Eretz Israel and the whole, how do you call the vertical line in the map, in the globe?
Longitude.
The longitude. So it characterizes the whole longitude, except that so we have the longitude, and then the other one is called?
Latitude.
The latitude. The latitude would be Eretz Israel. Yeah. So, but where on the longitude Eretz Israel is, that's unique to Eretz Israel. But the whole longitude has this aspect of being somewhere between the East and the West, culturally speaking. Europe is the West. Western civilization was born in Europe. And Asia is the East, whether it's the Far East of the Oriental religions, or it's the Near East of Russia. And most of Russia is to the east of where the Baal Shem Tov lived, with most of the civilization we know. And in that time, there was you could feel it was very palpable, there was a mix of Western and Eastern influences. And that's why not just Chassidut, also in parallel to Chassidut and following Chassidut, non-Jewish movements were born, had to do with this area. And you had this Russian person called Ouspensky and his students, and you had the whole movement of theosophy, which then became anthroposophy. And they were all born through people who they were Russians. So there was a revival of mysticism in Russia, basically, in the 18th and 19th century, leading up to the 20th century. It went all the way that in the times of the Iron Curtain, when there was this disconnect between the West and the East, the communist world, you also saw it with Eastern Europe, even with the Nazis. they were far more open to mysticism than Western Europe was. Western Europe mocked anything that was mystical. Telepathy, no research was put into that. Stalin funded the research into telepathy and clairvoyance and you can move the, how do you call it, when you can sort of move things kinetically or psychokinetically, telekinesis. So they were far more open to it. And it has to do with being situated spatially between Western Europe, the home of Greek and Rome and rationalistic, later on materialistic science, and the whole world of the East, which is far more spiritually oriented. So this combination is common to Eretz Israel and to Ukraine in an interesting way. And so the Baal Shem Tov sort of was able to borrow from these two sides of the map of the world. And in a way, it has to do with the same kind of sort of meridian of Eretz Israel. And he was, in fact, oriented towards Eretz Israel. He wanted the Baal Shem Tov to make aliyah, to emigrate to Eretz Israel, to go up to Eretz Israel. And he was stopped. Later on, in the third generation, fellow student of the Alter Rebbe, of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Vladi, fulfilled this dream. This is Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk, who came to Eretz Israel, and him and his disciples are all buried in Tiberias. So they had this kind of alignment of east-west balance. So that's the why there of Chassidut. Then there's the why then. So the time we're talking about is a little bit before the French Revolution. The French Revolution, what's the word in English? Heralded.
Heralded. Yeah.
How do you pronounce that?
Heralded. Yeah,
Heralded.
It's hard to make it into a verb. Preceded it.
To herald. It heralded secularism. That's what it did. It heralded. And basically it was the beginning of secularism, politically and also culturally, by toppling down the ancient regime in French, which then reverberated also in America before. And this time of revolution was the time of the rise of the modern republics, the modern democracies, and basically it started off the whole revolution of letting go of tradition and trying to create a new world, a world in which reason rules and not faith and not tradition. You're not accepting things based on tradition. And this is a massive earthquake. This is why the world has been changing so rapidly and more rapidly over the past 300 years. Obviously, there's a lot of blessings with this technologically, in terms of medicine, and so many different things. And arguably also politically, it's much better. But on the other hand, the world has become so materialistic and is pulling us outside. And everyone is becoming so obsessed with material objects, material wealth, material technology, and people are being absorbed more and more. They're being exiled from their own inner worlds and being absorbed by technology. And now later on, it's there with the internet and the screens and digital technology, and it absorbs you so much. So in a way, the timing, the when of Chassidut is what we call to bring the medicine before the illness, like dim trufa lemaka. Every time God sends into the world a certain plague, a certain challenge, before that comes the medicine. We see this, by the way, in this week's parasha in the most beautiful way. The story of Joseph being sold and being taken down to Egypt is cut short in the middle to tell us a whole story about Yehuda and his whole story with Tamar and the birth of his twin sons, especially Peretz, which leads in the far, far future will lead into King David and the Mashiach. And the explanation is that before we are told about Yosef coming down into Egypt, which is the beginning of all the exiles, it's the beginning of the first exile, the exile of the Jewish people into Egypt. Even before Yosef reaches Egypt, the future Mashiach is born. Yosef is the father of the first Mashiach, the Mashiach ben Yosef. But the second and last Mashiach, the real Mashiach, the final Mashiach, that's Mashiach ben David. So it starts with Yehuda. So we can't go into the story of the exile into Egypt before we have an optimistic story about the lineage of Mashiach beginning. This is Lakdim Trufa Lemaka. The medicine comes before, or the cure comes before the illness. So in many, many ways, Chassidut is the cure to secularism. Meaning, it's a way to reconnect with God in a world gone crazy, gone amnesiac. In a world that forgot its divine origin, that forgot about spirituality, that forgot about the creator of the universe. And it's an amazing way, a beautiful way to look at all of the Hasidic stories and all the Hasidic wisdom as basically giving us the kind of language and the kind of way of looking at things that it fits beautifully with the modern secular mindset. That's why so many people today who return to Judaism, who rediscover the Torah, it happens. Even those who, by the way, go later on to a Litvish direction, usually their tshuva begins through a Hasidic story, a Hasidic Farbrengen, a Hasidic Torah that they heard, a Hasidic, dance or whatever it was, and that turns on their spark. Why? Because there's something crazy enough, funny enough that can find God everywhere, not just in the Torah books. Not just in kosher stories about perfect tzaddikim, but in stories about imperfect people who make mistakes, people who have a hard time, people who are dealing with very tough issues within their own souls, and very tough issues on the outside, people who forget about God and then remember God. All this, Chassidut is full of this, and this is why Chassidut is the perfect remedy for this world. And there's a famous story, because this is the holiday of the Alter Rebbe, that during the time that he was a student of the Maggid, his teacher, and there was a dispute between the disciples as to how much Chassidut should be spread out. And then at some point they were walking, and it was a friend, a peer of the Alter Rebbe. His name was Pinchas of Koritz. He was one of those who opposed teaching everyone Chassidut. And they saw a page of Chassidut lying around in some dirty place or some improper place. And he said, you see, that's what happens. We all write it down, we spread it, it's going everywhere, and then you're going to see it lying on the floor, lying in some place that's inappropriate. And so the Alter Rebbe responded with a parable. The parable was that one day the king's son, the prince, became very ill. And the doctors came and he said, there's only one solution, the only one way to cure the prince. We need to take the crown jewel, the main jewel of the crown, the most beautiful jewel, we need to grind it, turn it into a medicine, and have him drink it, and that would cure him. Do you agree? And the king said, of course. No, I don't care. If I lose the diamond, I lose the gem, the crown jewel, as long as my son lives. And then they tell him, hang on, it became worse. He can't open his mouth. We're going to pour it onto his mouth, and most of it will spill, but there's still a chance that one drop will come in, and he'll be revived. Do you still agree? I said, of course. Anything you can do. And the nimshal, the meaning of this, of course, is that the crown jewel, that's Kabbalah, that's the esoteric wisdom. And God doesn't care if most of it is spilled, and the pages, you see the pages with the Kabbalistic secrets are lying everywhere, and they're not putting it into Gniza, and people are making fun of it, and they're misinterpreted in it, and then you have this new Chassidut things, which is a lot of things people say whatever they want to say. I don't care, because within all that there's going to be some truth, and that's the only thing that can save this illness. So the illness is the forgetfulness of God that is the modern world. The modern world is the new Tower of Babel that's all about a man-made world that is reaching up for the sky and is basically trying to push God away from the world. And this is the illness. It has a lot of technological, boons to it and blessings to it, but it causes us to forget about who we are. So the timing, the when of Chassidut, is just as this catastrophe, in a way, spiritual catastrophe, again, boon in other respects. A spiritual catastrophe is about to hit, then Chassidut comes into the world. Then we have the Who of Chassidut, right? Because there's Olam Shana Nefesh, the world where, the Shana, the time when, and now we have the Who. So the Who is, we have those three generations, and we'll go over this very briefly. We have the Baal Shem Tov, and then the Magid, and then the Alter Rebbe. 3 generations leading up to Yutet Kislev. What do they stand for? Why them? What were they all about? So the explanation in Chassidut is that they are a reincarnation of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. They are called the fathers of Chassidut because they hearken back to the 3 fathers, forefathers, the patriarchs of all of Yahadut. Baal Shem, and it's very specific. The Baal Shem Tov is like Avraham Avinu. How so? He's all about chesed. That's why his movement is called Chassidut. Chesed is love, it's kindness. And he's just like Avraham, he's traveling from place to place. He would constantly travel all over the land, from village to village, from place to place, and just love people and take an interest in them and show how beautiful they are and how deep their souls are. And even if they didn't know to read and write, she showed that they have a deep connection to God. And that's like Avraham Avinu, who loves everyone and brings warmth and joy and happiness to everyone. And he was all about chesed. Then the Magid was the opposite. The Magid was like Yitzchak. Yitzchak didn't travel. He lived all his life in Eretz Israel. And the main story we know about him is that he constantly dug wells. The main story about him is that he's digging wells. So this is not chesed, it's gvura. Gvura is might, it's concentration. You're in one place, you go deeper and deeper and deeper into one place. And the Magid, in a way, founded the Hassidic avodah, inner work. He took the vision of the Baal Shem Tov, and he wasn't focused on spreading, he was focused on deep prayer, deep meditative work, deep inner work. It's like digging a well, and it's going deeper, and people would come to him. He wouldn't go out. People would go up to him and to his place in Mezrich, and then they would learn. When he passed away, once again they all started spreading, and thus formed all the different Hasidic branches. Most of them were students of the Magid, who after his death came back. It's the classical structure of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. They were again like the Baal Shem Tov, going each one, but this time each one took one sort of branch of the Chassidut and took it in another direction, another place, and you had all the tree of Chassidut is coming into formation. And then finally we have the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe is like the Yaakov of Chassidut. Yaakov, we know, was Ishtam Yoshev Ohalim, a wholehearted, a sincere man, a dweller of tents, meaning he studied Torah. The primordial Torah that was there for the forefather, for the Avot, he studied it. And so the Alter Rebbe is the founder of taking the Torah of Chassidut that was very, very short. Both the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid wrote very short little ideas, nuggets. With the Alter Rebbe started whole lengthy essays of Chassidut. And he wrote it, he developed it into a very serious, very consistent, very well-developed Torah. These 3 figures, both Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and Baal Shem Tov, Magid, the Alter Rebbe, are like the 3 pillars on which the world stands. Torah, Avodah, Gemilut, Chasadim. The world stands on Torah, on service, which is like the sacrifices, but it's also prayer, and Gemilut Chasadim, doing good deeds, and having a loving kindness, and charity. So it's in the reverse order. So the last pillar is Avraham and the Baal Shem Tov, and the second pillar is Yitzchak and the Magid, and the first pillar, the pillar of Torah, That's the third generation. It's Yaakov, dweller of tents, and the Alter Rebbe, who founded the very deep, very profound Hasidic Torah. I had a lot more things to say, but I want to keep it short. And so we're going to jump to yet another Olam Shana Nefesh, which is, it's all coming out of one of the stories that we have from what happened to the Alter Rebbe while he was in jail, while he was imprisoned. And we know that he was interrogated. And he wasn't just interrogated about the money transfers, he was interrogated about everything. What he wrote in his book, the Tanya, and a lot of things. And we know there's a beautiful story that is it beautifully connects with these three kinds of dimensions that is the motif of this class. The story is that he had a very intelligent interrogator at some point. And he asked him a general Torah question. He asked him, in the Garden of Eden, after Adam and Eve sin, God asks Adam, Ayeka, where are you? In Hebrew, it's one word. Beautifully, it's one word. That's another example of how Hebrew, unlike most other languages, everything is far more subtle and condensed. If you're dealing with translating from Hebrew to English, you know that every time you translate from Hebrew to English, everything is going to expand by about 25%. And the same goes the other way around. Every book, same book, would always be 20 or 25% bigger, thicker, longer in English. And Hebrew is a language, we can call it, its power is in its qualitative aspect, not in its quantitative aspect. It doesn't have as big a vocabulary as English, but it's far more modular in the way it's built. You have the roots and you can play with them with the same roots in many different ways. You don't need a bigger vocabulary. So if you're looking for wealth and breadth of words and synonyms, the English thesaurus would be far bigger than the Hebrew thesaurus. But in terms of can you just shut it down? Just find it in. It's somewhere. It's over. It's over. Never mind. So in Hebrew, it's one word, Ayeka. So this interrogator is asking the Alter Rebbe in prison, right? It's a very interesting interrogation. He's asking him Torah questions. Is he asking him, what, does God not know where Adam is? God knows everything. He's omnipresent, he's omniscient. So the Alter Rebbe tells him what Rashi says. Rashi says that God, of course, knew, but God was looking for an excuse to start a conversation. He didn't want to intimidate Adam. He was going to open up the question of, did you sin? He wanted him to admit that he sinned. And so it was like making a little bit of a small talk. That's what Rashi says. It's a way to start the conversation. And this very intelligent interrogator knew that it was Rashi. And he told him, no, I know what Rashi says. I want to know what you think. And then the Alter Rebbe said the following. He said, this question is for every person who ever lives, who ever lived, who ever will live. We're all descendants of Adam. We all need to read this verse, and God is asking each one of us, wherever and whenever we are, Ayeka, where are you? And then he said the following, you are so and so years old. And what have you done with your life so far? What are you still planning to do with your life? Now the thing is that the number he said, the age, was exactly the age of the interrogator. And he was taken aback. And basically he suddenly, what are you doing? Is that what you want to do? You want to be here and be an interrogator for the Tsar? You want to sit here with a Jewish rabbi and detain him, stop him from learning and teaching? Is that what you want to do? Ask yourself. He didn't say all this. He just said it's for everyone. And it says, you are so and so years old. Now, there are several ways to understand what he did with the question. One is you can say, well, he knew the age of the interrogator and he wanted to surprise him. That's one way. Another way of looking at it is that he didn't know. He just threw a number, but by divine providence, it happened to be the age of the interrogator. But the most beautiful explanation is that if he was talking about every person standing before this question, and if the interrogator just told him, I want your answer, he must have said his own age. And it just happened to be the age of the interrogator. They were the same age, which was 56, by the way. We know this because we know when he was arrested. So we don't know what he said, but it's a very interesting possibility that he was talking to himself. He asked himself, where are you? Me. And he was just sharing it because he just told him, I want your interpretation. So he was just, maybe he lowered his eyes and he was speaking to himself. But by divine providence, they were the same age, and so it struck the interrogator as a powerful moment. Now, this connects with another incident that he had. There was some moment in prison that the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid, both deceased for many years, came to him in a vision. And he asked him, why am I going through this? Why am I imprisoned? And they told him there was a lot of opposition in heaven to your spreading of Chassidut. And it comes about in this world as an actual opposition of other people, other Jews to you. But there's a dispute in heaven whether Chassidut should be spread or not spread. And he asks them, should I stop? And then they tell him, no, now that you started, you need to continue and with more and more strength. And basically it has to do with his own shlichut, his own mission. He realized he wasn't doing his own shlichut. In many ways he was maybe copying the style of the previous Rebbes, because the moment he started writing the long essays, that's his main chidush, his main innovation, it was only after the imprisonment. Before that he was writing in the style of the previous 2 generations. So he realized, my problem is that I need to do it in my own way. I have my own different way, my own different mode. And I need to teach in a way that it's new, even if it's going to create opposition. That's my thing. It's Ayeka, where are you? Now, just to sum all this up. So the question Ayeka, where are you? It's a where question. It's a question that has to do with space, spatial dimension. Where in the world are you? But when the Alter Rebbe is interpreting this, he is going in the direction of the other 2 types of dimensions. He's saying, you're this and this years old. That's the time dimension. He's taking a question that is on the surface, a spatial dimension. Where are you located geographically? And he's saying, no, this is a time question. You're now so and so years old. What have you done with your life? What are you still planning to do with your life? And also he's taking it in a soul dimension. You as a person. We're all different. Who are you? So the question, where are you, becomes when are you, and becomes who are you? All in one question. So the beautiful story we got from the days leading up to Yutat Kislev is that he took this question and he turned it into a multi-dimensional question. And so in a way, what we can say is that Chassidut wants to give us a new space and a new perception of time and a new perception of self. And very briefly we'll say this, that the new perception of space is looking at the world and realizing that the world is like the scenery in a play. And the real things are going beneath the surface. As we're moving into the 20th century, the 19th and 20th and 21st centuries, and we're totally absorbed by physics and rationality, and people only want hard facts, and the world is very factual and very real, nothing else is real. Chassidut is there to tell us, remind us, what Kabbalah has always said, that this world is just the surface. And we want to know, where are we? There's world within worlds, and the real drama is not on the outside. The real drama is on the inside. Everything that's happening in the world, it's hiding a far more profound and subtler drama of the choices we make and how we keep our heads above the water, and what kind of world we live in. And then there's the question of time. The question of time has to do with, like I said before, experiencing and living the moment. We're not talking about the world as progressing just like the technology buffs have it, that the world is advancing towards some miraculous time. Elon Musk is all about turning us into an interplanetary society with automated cars and everything. It's amazing, it's beautiful, all, more power to him. But after it's all over, and we have all the automated cars in the world, and we have all the AI in the world, and we go to all the planets in the world, and we can go in the speed of light, we'll still have the same questions of what is the meaning of all of this, and what are we doing with this, and we need to look for God behind the curtain. And so the time question becomes, what are you doing now with everything that you have available to you, and with everything that's happening? And this is, and then finally we have the you, our own personality, which is Chassidut giving us a psychological model in which we're able to play. The main topic of the Tanya is that we can play between our lower selves and our higher selves. We have our lower selves that are more animalistic, and we need to accept them and not fight them, not work against them. We need to have a certain basic acceptance of who we are. Only then can we start proceeding by being sort of grounded in our own real, fragile and imperfect natures of the natural soul, the basic soul. And we also need to, it's two words, in Hebrew it's the same word lekabel, but for the lower self it's accepting our flaws and our problems and our weaknesses, and we also need to receive our higher self. And the whole Hassidic psychology is about the interplay between the lower self and the higher self, and how can we integrate both of them. And if you put all three together, it's all ayeka. It's all where are you. Why? Because as we're working on seeing beyond the surface of reality, and looking at time qualitatively, not in hoping for some future or lapsing back into some idyllic past, but focusing on the choices and the meaning of each moment that we can now change, and also believing that each moment Mashiach can come. And if it doesn't come, that means there's a spark of Mashiach that's coming, and we need to grab that spark and move on. And all this we're doing as we're seriously, deeply working on who we are and how we can improve and how we can work with our two selves. Then why is it all ayeka? Where are you? Why is the question a spatial one? Because we're building a mental space, a spiritual space around our consciousness. All these questions, whether it's space, time, or soul, are all about constructing a mental space in which you live. And this is ultimately what Chassidut is really, really all about. And it's the main gift and the main thing we're all working on as we're learning Chassidut. The main gift that we have from Chassidut, and the main thing we need to share with the world, is that you don't really inhabit a certain geographical place and a certain moment in history. This is very external. You're inhabiting a cognitive spiritual space. And this is your olam haba. This is your world to come. It's right here. You're building your olam haba around your own head. And you're building the atmosphere, and you're deciding. You can be a very poor person, be very happy. You can be a very wealthy person and be very sad. And why? Because it's all about the mental space in which you live. And every day and every month and every year, that's why we have to take stock of the time, of how far have we lived, and are we using our time properly. And then managing future time, what we have left, with the belief that we can change everything from between today and tomorrow. As we're internalizing this more and more, then we are building a proper, illuminated, open space around our psyches, and we inhabit that space. And so that's the question that the Alter Rebbe posed to himself and to his interrogator and to all of us, and that God posed to Adam. Where are you in both space, spiritual space, and time and soul. And it goes the other direction. We start with the soul. We start working on today and tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, and then this whole space opens up around us, and we can, invite other people into this space. The more we inhabit it, the more people around us, as they come near us, they sort of join this space. That's why when you come, you're next to a great tzaddik, a great sage, who's seriously doing the inner work of Chassidut. Just being near him, you feel that you're entering a mental space, a psychological space that is unfamiliar to you, that's novel to you, that wakes you up, that makes you be optimistic, and makes you think more positively and constructively about your life. Why? Because you're invited into his mental space. That's what he inhabits. And he doesn't inhabit it because he was born into it. He inhabits it because he worked on it. He constructed it with every day and everything that he learns and every good deed that he does. So this is our meditation into what is Chassidut, which is also where and when and who is Chassidut. And it finally boils down to where are you? Where are we, all of us? So thank you so much for being here.
Hi everyone, if you enjoyed this episode, please press like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. If you want more English language videos from me, please consider becoming a supporter via Patreon. You can find the link in the description below. Thank you very much, and see you in the next episode.